Welcome back to The Count, where we're counting down the major stories of the week. I'm T.W. Shannon, in for Lydia Serrani. Moving on to story number 7, negotiating an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. President Trump meeting with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy at the White House yesterday. The two discussing whether the U.S. will send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, although Trump says he would rather see the war end than provide weapons.
It's beyond the money. You know, we need Tomahawks, and we need a lot of other weapons that we're sending to Ukraine. And one of the reasons we want to get this war over is exactly that. It's not easy for us to give. You're talking about massive numbers of very powerful weapons. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about. Hopefully they won't need it. Hopefully we'll be able to get the war over with without thinking about Tomahawks.
The president still remains hopeful, it seems, but we're going to welcome now our panel now to discuss Andrij Dobriansky. He's the Director of Communications for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, along with former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Mr. Bill Taylor. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So, Ambassador, I'm going to start with you. Ukraine wants Tomahawk missiles, which have a range of more than 1,500 miles. Now, that would allow Ukraine to potentially strike very deep into Russia. Now, there are advocates on both sides of this. What are the risks and possible rewards, even of considering such a move like this?
TW, I think the big reward is it put pressure on Putin. We know it's been effective at putting pressure on Putin. When President Trump last week was talking about the possibility of allowing these Tomahawk weapons to go to Ukraine, President Putin panicked. He got spooked, and he asked for that phone call, and he got the phone call last Thursday, a long one. And what happened on that? He convinced President Trump to think carefully about these Tomahawks. But President Trump has the ability. He still has the Tomahawks on the table. He can send the Tomahawks to the Ukrainians, and he can threaten to do that, putting more pressure on Putin to end this war. That's what President Trump said he wants to do, and that's what he can do with these Tomahawks.
Well, Andrij, we know President Trump did speak with Putin on the phone a day before meeting with Zelenskyy, and he announced an upcoming meeting with Putin that's going to happen in Hungary. What can we expect from that meeting, from that summit, sir?
Well, first we need to see if President Putin has the courage to actually show up. I'll remind everybody that he did flake out on President Trump in Istanbul, telling President Trump that sure he would meet with President Zelenskyy in Istanbul. He ended up not even showing up, didn't even send his foreign minister. What ended up happening is we did have one summit in Alaska. So 1 out of 1, we'll see what happens as far as Hungary. We still have to understand that President Putin has been very wary of leaving the country. He's very paranoid, understandably, because we know that there's an international warrant for his stealing of 20,000 children, but also he would actually have to kind of fly over Ukraine to get to Hungary. So it's a question whether he feels brave enough. We know that President Trump has the power to go anywhere in the world, and that's probably why he invited him to Alaska. I think crucially, though, in the conversation that we heard yesterday, continuing the conversation about Tomahawks, which I'll remind everybody also, President Trump is the one who's been dominating this. So I support the ambassador's term that this is President Trump's play here. And it not only puts pressure on the enemy, which is Putin, but it also pressures the Europeans who have weapons like the Taurus, which is a 500-mile range, or other ones that Ukraine can use right now. So this is not just a one-on-one conversation about Tomahawk's attack, but it's President Trump likes to see the whole board, and that's what I think he's doing right now.
That's a really good point. Ambassador, same question to you. Is Putin actually going to show up? And if he does, what can we expect from such a meeting?
I think Andrej's right. Putin has reason to be concerned about travel. But if he does show up, that could be an indication that the pressure on him has been successful. The pressure, we've already talked about, just the threat of Tomahawks is part of the pressure on the military side. Andrej's right to point out that the Europeans can add to that pressure. There are sanctions, TW, that you've talked about as well, that the Congress is ready to do. The Senate has got 85 co-sponsors, bipartisan support, strong bipartisan support, to put real heavy sanctions on nations that buy Russian oil. That'll be a big thing. And then the third thing, TW, there are $300 billion worth of Russian central bank money in Western banks that can be taken, that can be given to the Ukrainians to allow them to keep going for 3 years. So this will convince Putin that he can't wait us out.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Now, after arriving in Florida yesterday, President Trump did urge both sides to stop the war immediately and even implied that Moscow keep territory it's taken from Kyiv, marking somewhat of a shift in his position. Now, after meeting with Zelenskyy on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly last month is when that happened, President Trump said he believed Ukraine could win back all the territory it had lost. What do you make of that, particular position of the president, Andrij?
Well, I feel that President Trump, especially over the last couple of weeks after that meeting at the United Nations, I talked to both President Zelensky's team as well as people who are close with the White House, that both sides were on the same page. And you can see that with the attacks on Russian oil facilities. We began with 1 in June. It's up to 31 in September alone. This partnership about putting maximum pressure on Russia is how we get to the end of the war. We've already diminished by 17 to 20% Russia's oil output, as well as natural gas. And President Trump knows that the United States is at the tip of the iceberg about how much LNG we can export. I would say that this partnership going forward is about putting maximum pressure, because what President Putin has done for every single conversation that he has had with President Trump, the very same night he has fired missiles on Ukraine. One day soon, it'll be Ukraine firing Tomahawks while President Trump is on the phone, and that's maximum pressure.
Well, gentlemen, we're out of time. We appreciate your insight. Andrij Dobriansky, Ambassador Bill Taylor, thank you both.
Thank you, GW.
Thank you.
Coming up, confronting China, President Trump's next move as he prepares to meet with Xi Jinping.